Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the Green Room podcast. And this podcast was founded to share raw, authentic stories of resilience and provide a space where the heavy things we carry can finally be given a voice. And it is my complete, absolute pleasure, an idea which Eddie's been bringing together here, which we've kind of sold us on that, and we're going to be getting it up and running, aka this first session. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce the Open Table. And Eddie, again, this is your great idea. Where did the idea of this come, of bringing the Open Table? Where did it actually come from?
So after my stroke, when I was in stroke recovery, I found it hard to talk to people. So I reached out onto the internet and I stumbled across a clip that John Bernthal does called The Real Ones with Shayla Booth. And Shayla Booth opened up massively about the struggles of being a childhood star, the mental health depression that he had, and he became very vulnerable. So from that, I stumbled on a clip of the Actors Roundtable, and Shayla Booth was on that. There was Adam Driver, Adam Sandler, Tom Hanks, and there's a little clip where Tom Hanks is talking to Shayla Booth, and he says, "You feel happy today? This too shall pass. Feel angry today? This too shall pass." And I thought to myself, it's really good that actors are doing this, but why are everyday men not doing this? Why are we not talking about our struggles? So yeah, that's where the idea came from.
When you mentioned about that talk, I remember years back having my kind of wake-up call those years back, and I remember watching some of that. It was you which kind of reminded me of Eddie, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And again, it's pretty nice to know that we're doing this for the reason of the everyday man, not a celebrity, and which they can have that big clout and following, but with us, we're everyday working men where we don't have that kind of big input from others, if you like. So I'm really glad that you brought this to here, and cheers for that, Eddie. I really appreciate that. And for those who are listening, I will give you a little introduction to both of my guests. Eddie was on one of my previous podcasts, which we done together a couple months back, and this one is our new one here, which is the Open Table. So for those listening, a little bit of background with Eddie. Eddie's a single father of two. A man built on mindfulness, grounding, discipline, and regulation. But it wasn't always that way. Eddie used to be what we called the Joker at the time, the fixer, and sacrificing his own well-being as a mask for his own emotions. And he suffered a transient ischemic attack, a TIA, aka a mini stroke, which brought on by intense stress and anxiety. And this forced Eddie to completely reevaluate his life, making major changes and rebuild a stronger, more authentic version of himself. So we have somebody else here who's Jeremy. Welcome Jeremy, aka Jemba, to the table. And we're really, really pleased to have you here, and I really appreciate that. And with Jeremy is a 35-year-old father of two, a man who's had to walk through the fire of, unfortunately, divorces, and with currently a second one, which is kind of unfolding, and progression is making there in his own way. He's navigated a really heavy undiagnosed death of depression, and made it out to the other side. It's great resilience to be able to do that. And lover of animals, nature, and he loves his motorbikes. And Jeremy faced a massive wake-up call the other year. He began experiencing a terrifying stroke symptoms and loss of hand and finger coordination in his right arm, and a heavy dead sensation in his right leg, slurred speech and severe dizzy spells, a numbness creeping across the left side of his face. And after months of testing, medication, it was ultimately put down to a severe stress and acute migraine attacks. And today, Jeremy lives on his own, a man of the world, and he is most at peace with himself than he's ever been before, and carrying a mindset that it's deeply strong, grounded, and most importantly, understanding. So Jeremy, Eddie, welcome to the table, and let's dive in. So let's talk about again, I see this a lot with males specifically in regards to talking about the mask that we have. And in therapy, we look at how society imposes certain conditions on ourselves. So our conditions of worth. So, our men as well. I mean, basically the internal unwritten rules that tells us that you're only valuable if you're strong or silent, providing
Yeah.
and bulletproof. And it forces us to develop what we call that protective mask. And that separates us from who we actually are on the inside. So we mold into that on the outside of where we are. And why do we think men struggle so deeply to find congruence, which again is just therapy speaking for having what you generally feel on the inside actually match how you show up on the outside? So, if it's okay to start with you, Eddie, you've spoken
Yeah.
about being the Joker fixer. How did
Yeah.
those masks serve you, and when did they start to kind of crack?
So I think I was taught from an early age. I kind of walked on a little bit of eggshells, like my parents split up at a very early age. So I learned to be more mature than I should have been at that age. And even from then, I became like a protector and a fixer towards my siblings. Even though I was the youngest one, I was the most grounded. I was always there as the support. I think I carried on learning that no matter how much I suffered internally, I don't want someone to feel that. So I started becoming like the laugher, the joker, someone that you could count on for a laugh. And if I didn't laugh, then there would be something wrong with me, everyone thought. But it's just normal everyday habit. But I felt that pressure then to maintain this persona that I'm going to make you laugh because I do not want you to feel like I feel. Um, and obviously that carried on um, until I kind of realized towards when I had my stroke, the only reason that I was doing this persona, the people pleaser, the fixer, the joker, was because I had a massive fear of like abandonment. I would be scared of losing a person out my life. So I would try my hardest and go out of my way just to make them happy. And that's when the stroke hit me. And after that, I kind of felt enlightened that you need to drop this act. You shouldn't be scared of losing people. People will come and go, and that's just life.
I really appreciate, and you've really highlighted a lot. And, just from my experience with males' patterns of behavior, I'm not saying I'm a complete expert here, but the key part of what you said about there being scared, there's so many guys out there. And even now, I get a bit of a lump in my throat about this because, when you see a guy who's so
Mm,
kind of got this mask on and deep down, they're so scared. God, I get a bit teared up about this. And it's really hard for them to be able to drop that mask and recognize who they are and what they want. And you've done an amazing way of doing that. And you mentioned about fixing everybody else, and it's what we say in CBT, in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's what we see as what we call cognitive distortions, and it's an unhelpful thought pattern where we believe we are responsible for everyone's happiness but our own. And what
yeah,
what cost, as we know, with yourself, that much pressure. I mean, to the point of your attack. I mean, guys are so terrible at doing that, pushing themselves to the extreme until something really bad happens. And I don't know what it is. That's when our wake up call happens. So I really appreciate it, and that you've really hopefully given the listeners some really good insight in that, and especially when I've seen guys do it. As you know, is so deadly, and sometimes worst case scenario happens. So I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And and just a question to you as well, Jeremy. And you've managed to navigate like depression without, like a formal diagnosis. And you spoke about in regard to, I'm not saying that therapy's for everybody, but carrying it silently while going through like breakdowns and marriages. What mask did you wear during those sort of days, the darker days, if you like, just to get through work or even see your kids? I mean, what was going on for you for your side of things there, Jeremy?
So to me, when you say the mask, it was putting on a show for people, i.e., telling everyone that you're fine, putting on an act, so to speak, that nothing really bothered you as such, even though a little comment here or something that someone does over there really bothered you at the time, that would still play on your mind, that night or that week. But it was putting a mask on of pretending that everything was all right when it wasn't. And I think over time it sort of caught up with you.
Sure. And again, it sounds like it's very similar patterns behavior there, and I can relate to both of you. I definitely done that myself, where we put that kind of mask on and mold into, our surroundings, if you like. And if anybody says, "Are you okay?" What do we say normally? "Yeah, I'm fine," and we carry on with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, both of you have kind of mentioned about kind of like the man up culture which we get put through. And if we kind of break that down to kind of to every man listening to this in their car or at the gym right now, what does man up mean to you kind of personally today compares to what you kind of thought it meant when you say, for example, the age of 21 in their early 20s? And how much of that comes down to our early childhood upbringing, for if you like? So we have what we call our core beliefs, so deep rooted kind of blueprints about ourselves and the world that we kind of form earlier on, that influences the way we kind of process and cope as men. Um and again, it's kind of, having that open discussion with you both in regard to, I'm not sure about yourselves. My stepdad, it was kind of like, man up, you don't show your emotions. That's what your mum does. Always remember that phase. And kind of that was what drilled into me through that childhood, especially having older generations, me and Jeremy were speaking about his dad, for instance, when he was a butcher and people's hands buggered. And most of these older generations have kind of had this so fixed into us that trying to unlearn that is really hard to do. So we build up anger, guilt, shame, etc. And that's our mask, even though some of them won't admit it. But again, you guys have managed to kind of face your own fears, if you like, and kind of recognize those ideas to help you progress through that. So it's having kind of like an open discussion, really. I know I've waffled some there, but do you feel kind of like our core beliefs or, deep rooted blueprints, as I said, about ourselves and that influence what we have as a child growing up and coping, if you like, and grow as men? Would you say that's kind of been similar to you both there?
100%. So mine was kind of polar opposite. It was like, um, when my mum and my dad split, I watched my dad go through some really like bad depression for a very, very long time. And I kind of learned that my emotion shouldn't come out because it felt like an overburden. It felt like I would put him down even further. So I wouldn't show that emotion for a very, very long time. And it was only until my stepdad, I'd say, when he came into my life properly, he started teaching me about being a man. So he'd take me to the gym, he'd take me like places, and he'd talk to me, but in a grounded way, just nice and calm. He'd say like, "How are you feeling? Are you all right?" And that's when I kind of learned that you should talk. And my uncle, like, he taught me so much about being regimented, discipline. He's this big alpha figure, ex-paratrooper, like jumping out of planes all the time. He's making me do press ups every day, getting me into that mindset. And then he pulled me over one day and he said, "Are you okay, mate? Like, how you doing?" And I was like, wow, like, to be alpha, it's actually to be compassionate and it's to share and open up. It's not to be silent.
Yeah, I think
Hell
that's
of
the
a
thing as well.
breakthrough there.
So back when I was, should we say, 21, the stigma of man up was not to show emotions and that kind of thing. But like Eddie's just said, um, the real sort of being an alpha, so to speak, I don't want to, put it in that context, but um, manning up to me is being able to like accept your emotions, being able to show them and talk about them, being very open about them.
Yeah.
To me, that makes someone stronger mentally than it does to like hide it all away. Because if you keep it
Yeah.
inside, you just get built up with so much pressure.
It's kind of it. I think, like, me and you, what we went through, like the stroke symptoms, everything like that, is that culture weighing down on our shoulders that we shouldn't be talking to people about this. We should just cope and we should move on. And I always think of my stroke, like the pressure relief valve just going bang, and that was it. It all came out, all that stress, all that frustration. So yeah, good point, mate. Really good point.
But I go back to like when we first spoke, Eddie, and again when you was in that moment having that stroke, and I always remember what you said to me, and this is like sheer, whether it's like stubbornness of a male or some sort of strength in one way to keep this mask on. I always remember you telling me that even though you felt like you lifted your arm up so you didn't want to fall in front of these other guys, but you still held on the conversation the best you could. For
Yeah.
me, I can only imagine what that was like, especially having that internal fight, but at the same time, still having that kind of man up mask, if you like, saying, "Oh, I don't want to look like an idiot here in front of people." So that alone, I can only imagine. I take my hat off to you,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me saying. The next day, after chest pains all through the night, you drove yourself to hospital, and that's when they gave you that bit of a
Yeah.
reality check of what I found really interesting is so many guys can do things like that. And deep down, we're scared, we're worried, we're massively vulnerable. But you still hold on there to have that kind of like, well, I better not fall in
Mm.
front of these people. Even though having that stroke, it just shows what I say to people. One, I really do love working with guys. But what I normally say is that we're pig headed, stubborn, and we know best. And I don't know about you two. I know I had that mindset different times, and things really look at you, both of your circumstances, how much you pushed yourself to that limit. And thank God that both of you are still here, because the reality of the truth, let's be honest, some guys go through this, and unfortunately, they know they're no longer around. So I really take your hat off of that persistent strength of just hanging in there a little bit longer so you don't look stupid in front of people. It's just
Ah,
amazing what we put ourselves through, isn't it?
mm.
Looking stupid. That's just me. Um, but yeah, it's definitely something to not be embarrassed about at all, about coming out with whatever's on your mind. You just have to get in that mindset of opening up. I find it easier to open up to strangers because you're not going to burden your family, so to speak, with whatever pressures you've got going on. But also, when you open up to strangers, it's amazing what kind of conversations you can have and just completely not expect it.
Oh, totally
Yeah.
agree.
I mean, like you say, in that moment, I was still being stupid. Like when I had that stroke, I know you touched on it, but I just remember thinking, I'm in the middle of a full blown stroke. I'm not even thinking about my safety. I'm thinking, I've got to be okay. I've got kids. I don't want to drop on the floor and make an idiot of myself. It's like, I don't want to make a scene. I just need to be okay and go back under the radar. And that's what I did. Like, I went home 15 hours later. I'm still having pains and I'm still like, I don't want to make a scene. I can't make a scene. And then it was only because people were like telling me off, my friends over message, like saying, go to the hospital. And I go to the hospital, that I picked myself up and went. It's crazy. It's a mindset that needs to change. It's a problem.
And both of you both know that it's what I say to any guys, even in my therapy sessions sometimes, for some of these guys to really gain trust with me and drop that guard down, it takes a real brave man to be able to do that. And, I've worked with people who have been, let's just say, well-known skateboarders through to scaffolders. And you can really see these guys really holding it in. And what I normally say, sometimes we go into this kind of childlike state or mode, as I should say, that we're massively vulnerable and all we want somebody to sit with us and kind of nurture us through that time. I don't know about yourself. There was a couple of times through my life where I was really struggling, and even if it was just a simple hug, I would admit it at the time because I'm a man. But even that, just to kind of give them that comfort to say, "Do you know what, you've got this, you can do it." And unfortunately, I didn't have that opportunity. And again, I had to, like you guys, I had to really find my way. And similar to what Jeremy went through, I went through from being an ex-DJ, music wide and confident, to somebody who locked themselves away for about 6 months, panic attacks, chest pains. I,
Yeah.
I can relate to that. And, fortunate to me to some aspect, it was more quite severe anxiety and depression. But again, it's so hard, and I can truly say it's really scary, but at the same time, it's really inspiring when guys can really open up and say, "Do you know what? Deep down, I'm bloody petrified. I'm scared, and I don't know where to go." And even now, that puts quite a lump in my throat because over the years, I've seen so many guys in that position, and when you see them drop that guard down, you can really see the relief with them. And don't get me wrong, I use a bit of humor in my sessions as well, just to take off the edge. But I mean, again, for me, I feel such relief for these guys, especially if I've had some who've come to see me for 10 individual sessions, and I've really kind of digged at the core of our core conditions, what our thoughts are, how they feel, how they see themselves. And sometimes it can take us quite a few lot of sessions, and sometimes you can see them really holding it in. And then eventually they release, as I say, that pressure valve of those emotions. You know, I've had guys teary, they feel stupid, they feel ashamed because they've done it in front of me. And I said to them, "So this is your space to do that. I'm not going to sit here pointing at you and saying, oh God, look at the big sissy crying his eyes out, if you like." But you can see once they start doing that, that transition really starts happening because they're not holding it in no more, and they're dropping that mask, and they start to recognize, like you guys do through relationships or how we start discovering who we are, what our needs are, what our wants are, and we're more open with our emotions now because we've had to try the long way. It didn't work. So we're going to try an alternative route, which hopefully is more better for our own well-being, if you like. So that kind of, it's really interesting, similar sort of stages we all go through, especially, with you guys. It's been quite extreme where I kind of shut myself away. I couldn't even walk up the road because all of a sudden I felt everyone was watching me, looking at me. And there we go, the anxiety kicks in, and it was like, I've got to get back to my safe zone, my comfort zone, which is my bedroom. And when I closed that bedroom door, I felt massive relief. It was like the world can't get to me. And as you know yourself, it takes so much confidence to kind of face that fear and grow with that fear. And we will have step backs, we will have down days. That's part of the parcel. But it sounds like both of you guys, like myself, have learned to release that pressure valve and open up. And even if it's just somebody you're happy you're doing that, because otherwise we know ourselves. What we're going to do, we're going to store this. It's still going to be there. We can travel the world, we can go wherever we like. But what happens? That elephant's still there until, like you guys have had to do, you've had to really get cornered with it and turn around and face it. So I really admire what both of you have kind of been through on there. And thank God that both of you are still here because, as we know, statistic wise, especially with male globally as well as UK, it's really high. And I'm hoping, as we all spoke in regards to, even if we're helping that one person who hasn't had the strength like we had, and if they can relate to any of your stories and reach out anytime, that's the purpose of this podcast, to be able to help that person who hasn't got that support. So, appreciate you both hearing my waffle there, but it's really, really interesting of what you both go through, and it's very similar patterns of behavior, what many of us do because of that guilt, shame, and looking stupid. I mean, any of you guys got any input on that at all? My waffle?
I mean, you hit a very good point there about walking down the street, for instance, and you feel like other people are looking at you. But again, if you don't talk about it to other people, you don't realize what they're also going through. So you're not alone. It's just if other people were to open up about it, it's having that courage to open up first, which is the hardest part. But it's amazing how many people are actually going through a similar kind of situation or different steps of that same phase. And you just don't know it's out there unless people talk about it.
Yeah. I think that, like, for me, since we did that podcast and everyone saw me going out there bold, the amount of people that you would think are like strong masculine figures that would never ever open up, that will turn around and tell me a story personally that was a really big hardship on them. It's unbelievable. So I think everyone's willing to do it. They're just scared of it. They're scared of that vulnerability. They're scared of looking at themselves and saying, this is what I'm feeling. I need to vocalize it. Whereas the good thing about this platform, what we're doing, is people see it and they kind of think, okay, if you can do it, I can do it too. I know you, I work with you. Like, I'll open up and I'll talk to bits. So, yeah, I mean, I think people are willing. I think they're just scared of that cultural change of men not being tough and men not carrying it. Do you know what I mean?
It's trying to break that stigma, though, isn't it? The stigma of
Yeah.
for men
Yeah.
to be tough, they just have to get on with it, which is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And I mean, and if you have a look at older generation, look at our generation, quite a bit older than you guys. I was going to say a little bit then, but I was waiting for Dig. So I'm quite a bit older than you guys. But then if you have a look at that
Silver
generation
fox.
above us, yeah, the silver fox. But when you have a look at kind of the older generation, our stepdads, our dads, etc. I mean, how that's ingrained with them. My stepdad is an old school mechanic. I would say a man's man, if you like. But then the only time I ever knew my dad to really show feelings it wasn't when my granddad passed away, it was when his mum died. And what I found really interesting, because I've never seen my dad teary, I've never seen my dad emotional ever. If anything, more anger and frustration reflecting back on that now. But when my nan died, what was really, really interesting for me is that my dad was really tearful and really emotional. And he actually went off for a couple of days. He just vanished for a couple of days. But at the same time, I remember as a child when if it was my mum tearing that side as a child, I kind of didn't really know what to do, but I was there for that comfort for my mum because I was used to seeing my mum cry. But when my dad done it as a young lad, I was like, what do you do? What what do you say to
Yeah.
him? I really didn't know because all my through my head at that time was, well, if I go over and say to him, you okay? He'll probably say, "Well, of course I'm effing okay. What do you think I am? I'm not a woman." Yeah, I mean
Mm.
that's probably similar to what he'd probably say to me, and then just go off and just avoid it. But again, how very similar patterns behaviour, even though it's older generation, but it's ingrained more. And I normally say to people, it's like deprogramming yourself, and change is scary. Being open's scary, as we know. But I mean, when we look at the long route we take, and we have this kind of emotional water well, if you like. And if we keep storing those emotions, what do? Something's going to give one way or another, whether it's anger, frustration. Some people go down that route.
Yeah.
Some people just carry on and think I'm fine. But it's there and it builds, doesn't it? And it's what I always say to people: you're like a cow waiting to boil. Something's going to give, and even if it's the neighbour's cat, for instance, aggravated you can take your frustration out on there, and it's so unhealthy how we do that. But so many people, guys especially, do that. For me, I find it fascinating, but hearing your guys' story and how you've done it, you've had the courage to face it, which was scary, I'm sure. But at the same time, if you look at your own personal growth now, if you both could kind of see yourselves going through that time, whether it was the stubbornness, the pulling the mask on, what would you say to that guy who was hanging in there, was kind of pretending everything's all right? So if you could speak to kind of like your younger selves at that
Yeah.
point, and when you're in that little vulnerable moment on your own, which can be quite scary, and the future Eddie or the future Jeremy appeared, what would you say to that person in the room? What would you tell them when they're in the thick of it?
I'd I'd honestly, I'd tell them to drop the ego and talk. And it's as simple as that. That's what it is. It's your ego's too big. You need to drop it. You need to become a real man and open up. That's what I would tell them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, for me, I guess it would be, just open up, talk to more people, so to speak. Um, and if I could tell my younger self, should we say, it would just I'll just say, it does get better. You just have to help yourself to make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can kind of relate talking to my younger self now. If I was locked in that room, I'd probably tell myself, look, this takes one step at a time. And the reality, the truth is, all these people you're walking past, to be honest, you're not that important to them because they've probably got all sorts going on with themselves. So you're not going to be the limelight because you're walking down the road. And you can gain some resilience and confidence from that if you take your time, where you guys kind of
Yeah.
had a different effect, if you like, with that. So you guys, I love it with what Eddie says. It's kind of a more man up way, but more opening up about your feelings approach instead of saying, well, you're a bloke, get on with it. And the same as you, Jeremy, it sounds like you started to kind of open up to say who you are and going through your feelings and start recognize yourself. And I can really relate to that there. And looking back, don't get me wrong, I'm not sure about you guys. We all have ups and downs still, but it seems like my
Yeah.
coping mechanism, and I'm really fortunate with the training I've done. And I'm not saying it answers all my questions because I have moments, but at the same time, I've managed to find healthy coping mechanisms instead of avoidance to be able to help me grow. And I don't know about you guys, I'm sure I've had a few moments when I've released some tears and emotions, whether it's pressure from work,
Yeah.
personal life's going on. But I mean, I've done it more like that now where I can release it. I do my meditation, my hiking, and I found my answers there. But at the same time now, I find myself sometimes I can be triggered and I feel that old Garen with the anger and frustration kick in. But then I managed to work with it and I hit, let's say, a 4 or 5 in my scale instead of a 9 or 10, if you like, and I press the fuck it button. So there's a big
Yeah.
transition there, I find. And do you guys find now that even though we do wobble, like I said there, but how looking at it now, where all of us seem like we took the long way round, many of us do, but how does it feel you found kind of that comfort in yourself and giving yourself that reassurance, saying, do you know what, I'm doing all right now. I can get through this. How does it feel you're doing that now instead of deep down knowing it but not telling yourself now?
Mm.
How do you both feel about doing it to yourselves now?
Um, I ca- so when I was in stroke recovery, I like obviously I shut myself down, like we all say, and I realised it was the wrong way. So I reached out on TikTok. That's how I know Jeremy. We were both going through quite the same situation. So from that, I took learning like lessons from that, opening up to people. It helps. So I opened up on Facebook. My friend Kieran, my sensei, I've spoke about him before, started teaching me like forms of meditation and like workouts to do on my recovery. And I kind of fixed myself into this little routine of like my adrenaline rush is working out. That's my anger gone. And then I can meditate to bring that back down. Hiking as well, nature, it clears your mind. So combining all of it is just such a massive, yeah, such a massive benefit. And from that, the ego goes like, instead of being in competition with other people, trying your hardest to prove yourself stronger because you're quieter and all this stuff, you realize yourself, you become in competition with yourself to feel better, have better energy about yourself, I would say.
Like Eddie just said, it's a it's a personal battle. So instead of it being in competition with other people, it's a competition with yourself, your own mindset, your own physical form, so to speak. Um, Personally, to me, I'm at the most at peace with myself, the most than I've ever been. Um, Now I've again through social media and stuff, I've made some really good friends and like-minded people, and it's nice to be able to chat to others. Even then, people have wobbles, but it's being there for them and giving them words of courage, words of hope, that kind of thing, just to try and make their day just that little bit better, a little bit easier. So it makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
I mean,
does.
again, just hearing like part of what Eddie and myself said, Jeremy, we said about like what our coping mechanisms are, what we found to kind of help us get through that instead of our old way. What have you found been helpful for you? Because I know you said about your motocross, the bikes, and that side. What to other people got the same mindset as Jeremy and into their bikes, etc. I mean, what have you found? It's like you said, as we discussed yesterday, of kind of you learn to sit with it, face it, and work with it. So, what do you find yourself, which kind of gives you that kind of takes that layer off, if you like, instead of going 0 to 10, let's say you're hitting 0 to 4 or 5. What is it which takes the edge off for you there then? Because you kind of found your own answers through this. So I'm interested to see what you was on there and what you find helps you.
So what I found helped me was acceptance and accepting what has gone on. Um, you can't change it. You can't change other people's minds, so to speak. So you either accept it or you don't. So accepting it to me was a big step, and it took a lot of weight off my shoulders. Um, you know, having that sort of bit of respect for yourself as well, not overreacting. Just think about it a little bit more deeply, how it would affect others if you were to act on something. Um, so yeah, like acceptance is a big part of it. Um, Obviously, when I was going through a bit of a tough time, that really helped me get over quite a lot of things, to be honest. So I'd say acceptance and forgiveness as well. It depends. Obviously, everyone's situation is slightly different. If you've been wronged by someone or whatever it is, if your job is, you've been sacked, that kind of thing, for completely unreasonable circumstances. Um, you can't change their mind, so accept it, but also just have that certain amount of forgiveness, just to think, you know what, I forgive you for it. See you later. It's time just to move on and crack on with my
Yeah.
life.
That is alone is what
Yeah.
we call in therapy our radical acceptance in regards to we
Yeah.
can't control what's around us, but what we can control is how we respond to that. And just alone, it fascinated me when we were speaking yesterday, Jeremy, is how you face that. I mean, it takes really hard work to be able to do that. And I'm not saying we don't feel things, of course we do. But it's looking at what angle, what do you fight for? Do you fight for something you have no control over whatsoever? Or do you radically accept and go through that acceptance that I can't do anything around this situation, but what I can do is how I respond. How can I work through this? And like you said, that big word forgiveness, I won't go into too much details, but some of the people in my past, it was really interesting. I really explored the forgiveness side of that probably about 2, 3 years ago. And now if any thought process come into that mind, I've generally forgiven that person. And it sounds really harsh, they're not in my life anymore. I've accepted that, and I'm quite content without them. So it's really fascinating what you've
Yeah.
done there, Jeremy. I find that really and how interesting. Very similar patterns for behavior, what we've all done, but we've had to really learn to sit in that own shadow and really accept what we've gone through. And you know yourself, it can be white knuckling sometimes, can't it? And we want to avoid because it makes us feel uncomfortable. But all three of us have had no choice but to sit in our own shadows and discover our own answers, discover our own techniques and coping mechanisms.
Yeah, and like you touched on earlier about only worrying about what you can control. You know, every day-to-day life stuff like getting an extra bill come through and which you weren't expecting, that pushes you into an overdraft if you have one, that kind of thing. Just I don't worry about it. It is what it is. I've got to pay it.
Yeah.
If you have the opportunity to work overtime to try and coop some of that back, it's just one of those things. Just worry about what you can control, and that again takes a lot of pressure off yourself. Um, because the things that you can control mostly is yourself. You can't control others. You can't control what they think, what actions they're going to do. But like you say, you can only control how you react to certain things, and that can shift, depending on how you act, it can shift from being a negative thing or a positive thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I was always kind of told like people will treat you as a reflection of how they see themselves. So I
Hmm.
think when you touched on that forgiveness thing, it's vital because you're forgiving them for how they feel about themselves. But in turn, you need to forgive yourself for accepting that that's a way of life, if that makes sense. You have to forgive yourself. You have to like find a way forward. That's why these coping mechanisms are so important. It's being able to sit with yourself and say in your mind, this has happened in the past. This is what it is. I forgive myself. I release it and let it go. That's what's important.
Yeah.
And as we all know, it's not a walk in the park, is it? Let's be honest, because we're used to doing
No.
opposite to what we used to doing because we're kind of built a way around in that, aren't we? And there's a question I want to ask you, and it's kind of putting both of you on the spot here. But as we know about compliments, you've done really well. I don't know about you, even to this day, I'm kind of, yeah, I'm happy with my progression, but I
Mm-mm.
don't kind of say, "Yeah, I'm really proud." How do you guys receive like your confidence? This is just me looking at this in general because so many guys do this, as I know, where when I've given guys small amount of praise of what they've achieved, reduce their drinking, not press the fuck it button, not hit the anger chart, if you like, and I said, "Well, that's something to be proud of." Many guys I've seen do that. And a lot of them do this, and I use a bit of humor in my sessions just to kind of settle things. But again, generally, when I say to them, "Is that something you're proud of, which you've achieved? Do you see progression here?" And you really see their body language change, and they kind of think about it, and they do like a little laugh, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I suppose I am a little bit proud of myself." And they go back in, and I said, "It's a good thing we can be like that." And so many of us do it. I was just wondering if you guys are similar.
Yeah. Um, I don't know because for me, like, I appreciate if you make the comment, but in my mindset, I can always be better. There's always a next level to this. There's a new stage, so I'm not the complete product yet, and that's just my mindset. It's everything can be better. Life can be better. The way I cope with everything can be better. So I'll appreciate the comment, but in my mind, I don't register it because I know I can do better, and I don't know.
So
I don't know
interesting.
about you.
That it's so many. Yeah. What about you, Jeremy?
To me, I think it depends what the compliment is and who it's coming from. So, if someone said to you, "Oh, you look nice today," "Oh, thank you very much," or "Oh, you're very handsome," or "Thanks," or if someone at work says, "Oh, you've done a really good job of that," and you kind of just sort of, "Oh, thank you," you just accept it, maybe just brush it off slightly. But it's when someone says you should give yourself more credit. I think that's when sometimes it really hits home, and you think, "Oh, maybe I should. I
Uh,
should give myself more credit."
That's really interesting. I'm really glad I had to ask you that by question because my mind was wandering there, and even now I'm laughing
uh,
about it because this is my nerves. And I've been really fortunate enough with meeting you guys, and I've been so lucky. I more than you can imagine. Even with my day jobs and my therapy work, I've been so very lucky. I've had people come to me in tough times and had that confidence to be able to work with me and seeing that transition, hearing your guys' story and how you changed things, it is so inspiring to me more than you know. And the other week I had a really good feedback with my day job, and I won't go into too much into it, but really broke a female's barriers round through cultural differences, etc. And she wrote this huge email, and Vicky is our admin lady, I can say her name, or she should be fine. She got me to read it out in front of the group. And it was really, really nice, but I was so embarrassed. I was and people generally said to me, "Look at what you've done, look what you've helped her build down that barrier, and she's really happy the way
mhm,
she is." And I'm not gonna lie, when I went out of the room and you're speaking about other, therapists and people within that room, when I went out that room, don't get me wrong, I didn't feel as anxious and I was like, actually, well done you. So I do it, but I still struggle. I find it, even
yeah,
though I've helped that person put input there, I still don't know what to do with them. I find it embarrassing. And I think Vicky done part of it anyway, because we've got that sort of relationship at work to say, "Oh, let's look at him so he feels awkward." Sort of humor we can use sometimes. But yeah, I really didn't know what to say. If anything, I was sat there embarrassed. But at the same time, when I closed the door and went out of the meeting room, I was like, "Oh, well done you." So I did have that little hop and skip, but I done it in my own little area. And I kind of, it's really interesting how we respond to that. And obviously, Jeremy, what you said, it depends on how the person said it, and what you said really can hit home. And it's really interesting with Eddie is the fact is he gets that compliment, but at the same time he's like, "Yeah, I've kind of done all right, but I know I can do more." So it's really interesting. So similar but slightly different there how we respond and then kind of
yeah,
go that way, if you like. That's really interesting. And I kind of want to look at kind of more kind of trauma, if you like, and the body's breaking point. And I want to just touch a little bit on trauma and kind of like the heavy stuff that some of us have suffered when we experience whether it's trauma. Our nervous system can get stuck in what we call our survival mode. Distorting our thoughts and how we perceive danger. And Jeremy, I kind of want to start with you here. And you had like a massive scare the other year and severe sort of stroke symptoms and loss of kind of motor skills, if you like, slurred speech and facial numbness. And after months of kind of, clinical tests, if you like, the doctors told you it wasn't a physical stroke. It was several stress and migraines. And, in therapy, we talk about our somatic experiencing. So, which is a fancy way of saying, how the mind and body are entirely connected, if you like. And when we suppress like that kind of emotional trauma, if you like, we bury it, the body eventually keeps the score and forces like a physical shutdown, if you like. What was going through your mind during those kind of months of like the testing? How did you realize your body was kind of screaming out at you to kind of process this kind of emotional pain, if you like?
So I think the big wake up call was having the stroke like symptoms. To start with, they put it down as a TIA, that kind of stuff. Um, to me, that was the point of, because I'm not a stressful person, but it was built up over time, years and years and years, that kind of thing. Stress at work, stress at home, and even though you don't feel stressed, it's still, ticking around in the background of your mind. And it got to a point of, my mind just saying, right, that's enough. And I started having all these symptoms. And to me, it was a big worry because to start with, having all the tests and stuff like that, I was worried that it was a stroke. Have I got something wrong with my brain? Is it a tumor? All this kind of stuff. It was just running through my brain. And I was telling myself not to worry, don't worry about it, don't worry, trying to, calm myself down. And then, as time went on, my doctor gave me some medication, which I'm no longer on, by the way. He put it down to, stress and like migraine attacks, that kind of thing. And it was a little sigh of relief that that's all it was. But again, stress can have so many different forms of, physical like damage, so to speak, and it can cause so much harm. Um, I yeah, I don't know. Like, just try not to let it build up. If there's something worrying about you, or something you're worrying about, should I say? Um, talk about it. Don't just hold it in. You know. So to me, that was the big turning point of, oh, I've got to change something here. Something's got to change. But you know, a few big changes in my life. I won't touch into that too much, but um, it really made a big difference of not being in those environments. You know, stress levels just dropped massively. All all the symptoms that I was having are completely gone. I might slur my speech every now and then. It's, one of them things. I'm not drunk. Um, but yeah, it's sometimes you've got to remove yourself from a stressful situation, or at least have that wake up call to then realize, actually, something's not right here. I need to change.
Hmm. Plenty of food for thought there. And and Eddie, kind of your story mirrors Jeremy's in like a profound way. So you actually
Yeah,
suffered a TIA and directly brought on by
yeah.
stress, anxiety, all the things we go through. And when you look at Jeremy's experience of his body shutting down, if you like, from stress, how much does that resonate with your own kind of breaking point? And what was the moment you realized your mind was kind of making your body ill?
Um, Now I look back at it, you can see every single sign that there was, but when you're in the moment, you can't see it. So there's the whole feeling fatigued, not feeling like getting up in the morning, getting headaches, slowing down, like not being as energetic. And up towards the point of the TIA, I started getting pains in my arms, like numb pains. And I just brushed it off because that's what men do, right? They don't go to the doctors. They just, we'll be all right. We'll be fine. Um, and then, like I say, the second that stroke happened, it was like a pressure relief valve. Everything went off. All the stress for 2 minutes just left my body. And it was a blessing in disguise in a way because I released so much stress. It was unreal in that one little moment. It was weird. It was so weird. But yeah, I mean, looking back now, you could see a lot, like your nervous system locked, all the pains, everything like that. So I think a message for people out there is when you start feeling these symptoms, you need to go get checked. Even if it's like a little numbness, little tingling in your arm, go get it checked because there is something.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you both because it's very, very similar to pressure you both put yourself through. And, unfortunately, Eddie had the real extreme. Not saying yours wasn't a bad, Jeremy, but at the same time, very similar to pressure, what you both done to yourself to the point the body couldn't cope anymore. And it's really scary how much we really, really push ourselves through that. And I'm really glad you kind of gave people the hint, the listeners out there ready to say, do you know what, if some of these things are happening, come and get checked out because at the end of the day, otherwise
Yeah,
you're just going to be hanging on there and you could be worst
it's
case scenario,
important.
let's be honest. It's it is quite really tough to be able to do that. And we
Yeah,
we kind of looked earlier on about kind of unhelpful coping mechanisms. I know years back with myself, as both I had a class A addiction, and I did have quite a lot of loss, relationship breakdowns, friends passing. But my answer to that one was getting off my head, jumping in total avoidance. I mean, no matter where I traveled, okay, I had that quick fix, and I still come back in there. It was waiting for me on the doorstep, and kind of talking about kind of running away or avoiding that we do. But I'm interested to kind of look at our kind of processing patterns and kind of what we call in therapy is we talk about what we call distress tolerance and our kind of baseline capacity to survive and handle intense, overwhelming emotions without making things worse. And when we don't have the tools to tolerate the pain, we turn to what we have as like our unhelpful forms of like escapism. Mine was substances to numb it all out. So if you're happy, if we go around the room, if you like, and Jeremy, you love nature, you love animals, you love your motorbikes, which can be incredibly healthy outlets. But before you kind of found peace, what did like kind of unhelpful escapism look like for you? So how did you use the things to kind of run away from your kind of internal reality? What was kind of going on for you there?
So what you mean, like the things that kind of helped me escape?
Yeah, what was the things which kind of, when we kind of jump into that avoidance, we know it's there, but at the same time, what we do, we carry on working, or, what was your kind of the unhateful kind of escapism techniques you was using at the time?
At the time, there wasn't really an escape. So when the kids were in bed, that kind of thing, I'd just go on the Xbox and try and like mentally shut off from the outside world, so to speak. And don't get me wrong, like gaming is really good. Again, you've got really good communities on there. It is like a little escape from reality, and you just go on there for a bit. That does help.
Yeah.
Again, going for walks. If you've got your dog, kind of thing, go for walks with your dog. I think getting out in nature and just sort of taking in nature itself, like appreciating the small things, especially. So sometimes just, on your walk, if you go out for one, if you see a nice view, just stop, whether it be 10 seconds, just have a look, you know, just, just look out there and just think, this is nice. Just feel that little bit of groundedness, so to speak. Even little moments like that can make a big difference to your mental well-being, I think. Um, just simple little things, really, like all the little things. Smell the flowers when you go past them. I don't care what other people think. What if they see
Yeah.
me sniffing the flowers? They smell good. Appreciate it. Little things like that.
That's what's really interesting. You're highlighting really points there in regards to what we do as in for therapy. I know I'm comparing a lot of that, but it's our five senses, which can be our slight distraction, something we can recognize, grounding ourselves, what you said there. So I love it that you found like your own kind of coping mechanisms, especially through therapy idea, but you found your own way and it works for you. And I really admire that. And
Yeah,
again,
I
same with
just
you,
think
Eddie.
nature is a really
Oh,
powerful thing.
yeah, yeah, I really appreciate it. And there is, if you're into any sort of therapy type stuff, Jeremy, have a look at Carl Jung's approach. When we finish the podcast, I'll give you some links on that anyway, in regards to how you find your own reflection in nature. And it's really quite, because you like all that. I think it's a bit in depth. Some of it, even to this day, his theories blow my mind. But it's really, really interesting when he seeks, because he done it himself, where he had, I can't remember where it was he was living, but he'd be in his own place and he'd be amongst nature, away from people. And because he had such an intense job, he was trying to seek in that sort of individuation, understanding who he was. So I really find that, and I can so relate to you there in regard to the amount of times I've gone into nature and discovered my own answers, no matter what I've gone through. It kind of gets rid of that distractions, those four walls caving in, everyone's views and opinions. So it's kind of giving you sort of a clear message to yourself, isn't it? So I find that really fascinating with what you do there. And kind of moving on in regards to you, Eddie, what was your kind of escape route? I know you kind of hung on there and thought, oh, I've got to carry on. But what was your escape route when kind of anxiety become too loud to sit with and the pressure you had? What was your kind of escape route at that time?
Uh, so when I was younger, I'd turn to like marijuana, alcohol, but I kicked that habit by the time I was like 15, 16. And then it was this fixer role, this joker that came in. And for so long, I was just people pleasing. Like, I'd always be busy. I'd go to work, I'd be busy at work, I'd come in, I'd clean dishes, I'd run around the house doing every single job that I could until late at night, bearing in mind I'm working 12-hour shifts. And even on my days off, I would not stop. The only real time that I would give myself is gym time. So
Mm.
this role of like being a fixer, doing everything that I could to make everyone's life easier, making them laugh, everything like that, that was the unhealthy habit. And all that was is I wanted to please people, so I never lost about my life. And that's what the stroke revealed.
Wow. I had to take a deep breath for that, and
Yeah.
seeing so many people do that is, yeah, well, I'm glad you're both still here. That's all I can say now. And kind of, if we look at this, kind of at some point, the escapism stops working, the wall hits, and in therapy, again, I'm for what we call radical acceptance, which is kind of, which means completely accepting reality as it is in the present moment without trying to fight or
Yeah.
deny it. It's the most kind of it's the moment you stop fighting the storm and you admit that you're wet. We haven't been in the full storm. Okay, we've got some rain on us. And what was the kind of, you know exact situation, or the behavioral breaking point that forced kind of each of us really into a space of radical acceptance? So the moment where you looked at a mirror and said, I can't run anymore. I have to confront myself.
Yeah. Uh, y- yeah. I mean, that, like I say, that moment for me was the stroke. It was the second that relief valve went off, that's when I looked at myself. And that was like, I don't know, it's weird. Like, it takes a big trauma for you to see yourself and face yourself. Like, deep down inside, I was always running away from myself. And that's hindsight for you, isn't it? It's sooner or later you'll catch yourself up and you need to face that person and you need to overcome that battle that you're running from.
Just similar there, Jeremy.
Yeah, so like Eddie said, the big health scare, that kind of thing about all the stroke symptoms and all of that, it was a big turning point for me. But also, you know, going through like this separation as well. Um, that's kind of the point where I started to. I lived on my own. I couldn't change what other people wanted. I wasn't going to beg or try and stay because that person has already made their mind up. Don't get me wrong, I still respect them. The mother of my children, that kind of thing, absolutely spot on. Um, I just I accept that they move on with their life. I move on with mine. There should be no um, like bad thoughts, so to speak. I don't dwell on it because, again, that can just bring you down. It is what it is. So those two moments
Yeah.
for me, I think, was the point in my life where I thought, right, now I've got to concentrate on myself, find myself again, figure out what I like. Um, like now, I'm trying new things. This, for instance, this opportunity came up, so I just thought, you know what, go for it. Um, Other things that I've never done in the past before, I went to London with a friend to watch Hamilton, and I've never been to the theatre before, and I absolutely
Okay,
loved it.
excellent.
So again, just trying new things. Just now that I've got, I don't want to say freedom because that sounds really bad, but uh, trying things that I've never tried before, so to speak, just to see what I like again. Um, it's quite a mindful
Yeah.
place to be, I'd say.
And it sounds like obviously what you've done there is kind of reflect, kind of lifted your own restrictions on yourself or what you're doing and what you want to do, etc. And that's really be hard to shift over to that transition because we're used to kind of molding in and helping everyone the best we can. But sometimes we forget about ourselves and it's really hard. We feel selfish in a negative way. We feel, we're not pulling our weight. There's so many, as you know, we could speak about that for hours. The dynamics are there. And
Mm.
kind of looking at kind of our emotional regulation and sort of our true growth here. So, healing isn't becoming soft, it's becoming self-aware. It's about building our emotional regulation, if you like, and the ability to manage our emotional states rather than letting them run the show. It's moving into what we call, in dialectic behavioral therapy in our wise mind, that perfect sweet spot where our emotional mind and our rational mind meet. And again, obviously, Jeremy, you mentioned earlier on in regards that you live on your own and you are most at peace you've ever been. You have a strong understanding mindset. And what does kind of daily emotional regulation look for you? So when a stressful thought or a trigger comes up, how do you handle that differently than like you did years prior to that?
So years ago, I would probably procrastinate, so to speak. So put it on hold. I'll get to it when I can, kind of thing. Whereas now, for instance, a stressful situation, whether it be at work, I kind of think about it and I deal with it there and then it's done. I'm not dwelling on it
Mm.
anymore. So I think sometimes, depending on what it is, you just kind of have to accept it and tackle it, kind of thing. Because if you don't and keep leaving it, it's just always ticking in the background, again in the back of your mind. So I think just trying to deal with certain situations there and then helps a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate you do what we call opposite action, where you're kind of facing it. And how much relief does that give you, though? Even though sometimes we can be scared, we can get triggered with some anxiety, some avoidance. But how much pressure does that really take off you now? Where we have to take the leap of faith sometimes, and it's second to none, isn't it?
Yeah, so to start with, you get that little bit of anxiety to say, "Oh, I've got to do this somehow. What do I do?" But just trying to think logically about it to start with, and then think, right, to start with, I've got to make this phone call, and then you make the phone call, and then just it sort of presents itself as you go along, and then you realize what you've got to do, what you need to do, and before you know it, it's over. So the weight has, of a stressful situation is completely lifted because you've almost dealt with it there and then, so to speak.
And how many of us go into that route of our automatic thoughts where you think worst case scenario, and nine times out of ten, it doesn't necessarily work out that way. And we can go into that transition and think worst case scenario, avoid. Um, Procrastination is a big one, as we all know, because it's kind of our coping mechanism and how we can kind of avoid. But you've really learned to break that cycle. I really admire that you've done that, and again, kind of going to Eddie in regards to this, really thanks for that, Jumbo. I really appreciate that. And Eddie, Eddie, you've built your life now, you know, on grounding, discipline, and regulation. Walk us through kind of your
Yeah.
practice. How do you keep yourself from slipping back into the old fixer or the joker patterns when life gets heavy?
Uh,
Because again, you know, life does happen, doesn't it? So I'm really keen to know kind of how you keep yourself from slipping back into that, you know, fixing person, if you like.
it's easy. I've just learned to say no. And that's it. That's as simple as it is. If it's an overburden, a stretch for me, I'm not going to go that extra mile to do it. That's as simple as it is. I do anything for my kids, but that's my responsibility as a father. I have to bring them up the best that I can. But beyond that, you, these people, you're an adult as well. You can fix your own problems. You don't need someone to fix them for you. So I'm not afraid to say no anymore. Like, you have to be a little bit selfish in life. You have to go do the things that keep you grounded because you can't offer anybody anything until you're at peace with yourself. So I have a routine where every morning I'll work out, go to the gym, I'll do some meditation after, or I'll do it during my workout. And only until I've done that point and I've got myself on a level plane, level grounded, then I might go and help someone and go out my way for it. But until that point that I am okay, I'm regulated, my kids are okay, they're fine, I'm not overexerting myself. And I think that's the thing I've learned. It's okay to be a bit selfish. Life is busy, life is stressful. And taking moments for yourself is not being selfish, it's just being self aware.
I really
And I think you
appreciate
touched
that.
on
And
quite an important part there as well, is, whether it be a relationship or anything, you compromise in everything, but it's not compromising too much where you lose yourself. You've still got to have that certain amount of, self-respect, and, keep doing the things that you enjoy, but also, helping others at the same time.
I
I
think that's
really
another
appreciate that.
it's another thing that's mindset of society that a man should self-sacrifice. It's the same for single mothers as well, that they should always self-sacrifice for the needs of the others. Whereas they need to learn like caring for yourself and taking moments to yourself isn't selfish. It's just you are not just that person all the time. You are an individual and you have to discover yourself to be happy.
And you highlighted a really big point there, what you said, and I know you guys have done it. I certainly have myself. Is that most importantly, our healthy boundaries, and that big two-letter word is saying no. Because again, the old ones of us would have felt guilty. We'd have wanted to fix things. We'd have, you know, but the harsh rate is our life goes on around us. People have their own battles and dynamics which are going on. But sometimes we have to say no. And like you said, Richard, who is my ex supervisor, I've said to you guys about this, you know, being selfish is putting one's needs before others. Sometimes we have to do that because otherwise we're going to go back down the paths we've all took. And, you know, as you know yourself, it takes a hell of a lot of resilience. And I can say this on here, balls to face that, especially in regards to saying no, because we go from that guilt and feeling, you know, I should be helping these people, and we really burn ourselves through that. And it's really hard sometimes to say that, you know, big two-letter word, which many of us avoid, is saying no. And so you really highlight
Yeah.
that. I think that's why I smiled and chuckled earlier because again, there's so many guys get to that point where it's like, oh, you know, this week, Aaron, I said no, and I said, well, how do you feel about that? They said, feel a bit relief, but I still feel a little bit guilty, which
Yeah.
many of us do. But we start learning that healthy thought process, and it's really hard, as you both
Yeah.
know. But I really appreciate what you've said there, and you know that's kind of really opened up more, and hopefully with the listeners here, that gives them an opportunity of how similar, you know, similar backgrounds, similar patterns, behavior, all three of us are had in this, and how many other guys out there are kind of going through that same cycle, learning to break that, have that brave move to say no, or you know, reach out to help when we don't feel we're worth it. It's really hard for us to be able to do that. Um, and we kind of, again, just kind of, we've had a look at kind of our escapism, what we found to help ourselves with explore our emotional regulation and our kind of true growth, if you like. So again, it's kind of, having a look back at kind of versions of yourself. So if we kind of have a look at, um, if you could kind of look back on your version of yourself, and we explored this a little earlier on, that was sitting in that really dark, scary, silent place, completely isolated, massively vulnerable, body breaking down. What is the one piece of advice you'd give him? And what does peace generally mean to you both today?
Um, the advice I would give is still the same. It's like drop the ego, but learn to say no as well. Learn to be a bit more selfish, I guess. Drop the ego, learn to say no. And peace to me is how you feel about yourself. It's that knowing everyone's different. Of course, they're different. So I can only say it from my perspective, but my perspective is my kids are fed, they're clothed, they're happy. That's my peace. I've done what I need to today. I've done enough. I am enough. That is peace.
What about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I've got to agree with Eddie on that part as well. Like peace is how you feel within yourself, um, but also how do I word it? When you've got your kids, obviously their needs come first all the time. Um, as long as they're happy, I'm happy. When I don't have the kids, I concentrate on myself. Um, just trying to feel grounded all the time, that kind of stuff. Uh, my thoughts will probably come back. So, yeah.
No, I really appreciate it. And kind of going on from that, from what we both said, I think obviously with how you guys are, with the kids and that, I haven't got that in my life. And I think, to be honest, looking back as what I tell myself is that I projected so much kind of hate, I'd say, and anger and frustration to people who I was there for them where they let me down, which again, I so shifted into that anger and frustration. Why would they do that to me, et cetera, et cetera. And that was, I'm going back to 2010 years. But this time around where, I had my marriage breakdown, I thought about for the first, little while, because as you know yourself, it's like everything's changed for yourself. But what I done, I was speaking to Jeremy about this yesterday, is that I kind of learned to really sit with my stuff like you guys done. I thought, okay, you're going through all the stuff you've gone through and you know what you know. You've got the tools in your head, all that side. How do you work with this client? And I don't do this to all my clients, by the way. I really hit it head on. So my training, my running, my meditating. I mean, mind you, I was still kind of some aspects being at my mum's, sofa surfing, staying in my car, running 3 jobs. But I managed to get that structure in place for myself, and I started believing in myself. And I can assure you, I don't know about you guys, I can be quite an emotional guy. And when I remember running one day, and I
Mm.
got really emotional, it's stupid o'clock in the morning, and I got really teary, and I don't know what it was. I've only told a couple of people about this, and I'm going to share this here. I don't know what it was, but I stopped at that moment because you know yourself with your training, Eddie, when we push ourselves that little bit too much, which I was doing, it was my ego, I'm not going to lie. But at the same time, when I stopped, there was something really kicked in me and told me to keep going. And do you know what I did? And even though the next day my legs were like jelly, but do you know what? I felt so good for that because I had to really release that stuff and find that release on myself where
Yeah.
I switched off from being the angry guy and resentful because people left me in the shit. I'm not going to lie. But I cut that ties from that, and now, I cast you guys as my friends, and because we're on such a similar level, and I can so relate to you both. But the thing is, now I don't have that dead wood in my life, and I can assure you, I don't feel guilty for it. I feel more grateful to those experienced people brought to me. So it's kind of, with the kid thing, I can't relate to you guys, but I give you some insight of how I responded to how I was previously, where to now, of course I get triggered, of course I feel things. Sometimes I think, oh, here we go again. But do you know what? I break that cycle and that pattern, and I have to put myself at the front. If I don't, as you guys know, my family members are gone. A lot of my closest friends over the years did pass away. So, I don't have like the family members, I don't have the kids to fight for, but I have to fight for myself because the reality truth is if I
Yeah.
don't, who's going to do that for me? And I'm very fortunate, meeting you guys. I'm really happy that you're part of the podcast. It means the world to me here. And I'm really fortunate, I see a therapist myself. I think we have to sometimes because of the therapy work I do in the day and night. And I've got an amazing supervisor as well. So I'm really, really grateful for them that, it is intense work I do. But at the same time, I've grown so much and I'm no longer angry with the world. If anything, I'm questioning more of, okay, how can I grow? How can I, like you guys, how
Yeah.
can I reach out to that other Garen out there or like Eddie out there or like Jeremy out there? And as I say about this podcast, this isn't about fame and how many clicks I get. I don't care. I mean, but many of us have been in that dark place, and luckily we found our own kind of ground and dug ourselves out the hole. There's guys out there who are not brave enough to come and seek help. And like I said, I'm not saying therapy is for everybody, but that fear that we have, that kind of young boy fear of the world, we can't say no, or we've got to keep on going because if we show some emotions, everyone's going to think we're a wimp. And it's so hard for us to be able to
Yeah.
do that. So I really want to thank you both for, kind of being here and sharing your story. And do you know what, as I say to anybody out there, like I said, I've only been advertising through TikTok and social media because that's kind of the ways to be. But I'm generally not worried about how many views I get. I really don't. And meeting amazing guys like yourself it really truly is really inspiring. And God, I'm getting a bit choked up here, guys. So don't take the piss.
Oh,
um,
bless you.
I really do appreciate that you guys have had the brave front to connect with me and share your story with other people because as you know yourself, I'm not sure about you guys. I have gone through quite a bit of loss in my life. And these people, I don't know why they've done what they've done, but we found our own ways and we're still standing. And if we can kind of somebody can relate to what we're saying here to give them that kind of kick they need to get themselves some kind of traction and support. I feel like I've done my bit. And how do you guys feel about hearing that? And there we go. You got me.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of the purpose of the open table. This is why I was so keen to join up with you and get it going. It's because it's not about us, it's about creating a sense of community. It's about men, women all coming together, openly talking and showing that it's okay to talk. It's fine to talk. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you anything. It just makes you human. And if anything, you're more at peace the more you can talk about it. So that's why I was so passionate to get it going. Because you can have amazing chats with strangers, like Jeremy said, open chats. You can connect with so many people, but it's all about community, helping each other grow.
Yeah, I'd say
And
as
what about
well, touching
yourself,
on that,
Jeremy?
it's about acceptance, accepting that, oh, I don't feel quite right. I've got to come to terms with it. Having a chat with people, so being open, and also not worrying about what other people think is a really big one for me. So, sometimes you can feel caged in whether you're out and about, whatever it is that you're doing. It's trying not to worry or think about what others are thinking of you. Just concentrate on yourself, have fun, go out there, be yourself, and just just accept it. Be open. You are who you are.
Yeah.
Nothing can change it. Why should other people have a say in, you know, how you should act, what you should do, how you should feel, things like that. So yeah, don't be afraid to talk to people.
If it is. Yeah, I don't think there's much I can add there, guys. And as you know, I waffle loads. I think the only thing I can kind of say from the eyes of my view on that is kind of, if you're in that dark place, is sometimes we have to sit in our own dark shadow, just truly discover who we are as much amongst that fear without
Yeah.
that avoidance, which is one of the hardest things any bloke can do. And I would challenge any male on this planet that, if people say, well, I'm okay and they carry on, but deep down, all of us have got a mask, all of us have got that fear and elements, but it's how we open up about that instead of saying, oh, I'm okay, but deep down, there are niggly things. Some guys find their own coping mechanisms and progress. I get that. But some people, like as we done, pushed ourselves to our limit, carried on, thought we was okay, but hidden behind, we was entirely avoiding what was going on. So I really, really
Yeah.
do, thank you for you, Eddie, coming up with this amazing idea. And I'm really so looking forward to running this alongside the Green Room podcast. And if anybody knows, there'll be some details in there to either contact myself or Eddie in regards to, being a guest on the show and, all of us have got a story to tell, and hope you have too. And it's having people on here who have experienced similar to what we've done and got through it in a healthy way, and to be able to share their story to inspire others. And a massive heartfelt welcome again to both of you. Jeremy and Eddie are incredible, sharing that incredible sort of vulnerability and honesty and raw strength with today. And I really, really do sincerely appreciate both of you being on today. It means more to me than you know. And we can probably have a cold one after this, and you two can take the piss about me being emotional, but we'll figure that out when this is all closed down. But I do, hand on heart,
I've got some tissues ready for you.
I knew you would, and I had a feeling I'd do this. Normally when I finish my podcast, people do bring such amazing stories to me and inspiring stories, and I do release some emotions, but I can honestly say this is through my compassion of what I do, and I absolutely love what I do. So really, really sincerely thank you to you both. It means more to me than you can imagine. So yeah, God, I'm holding them back. So yeah, big boys do
thank
cry.
You for hosting.
You that.
Thank you for hosting, and thank you for taking the time out to process the script and everything you were going to ask. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
and there
I'm going to touch on that as well.
know.
I do appreciate the hospitality and both of you inviting me to, something like this. It's not often that the opportunity comes up. So, yeah, just hit it head on, and it's been fun. It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really, really do appreciate it. I'm just going to do my last spiel now before I go into a blubbering moment. But to every person listening to this isn't just a recording. It's a lifeline. And if you're sitting out there carrying this weight alone, let this be the evidence that when we offer ourselves unconditional positive regard, meaning total judgment-free acceptance to who we are, flaws, trauma and all, and step out of the silence, true healing can really begin. And again, there's too many people out there and too many trauma victims who are fighting battles nobody else is, and this isn't about trying to fix you. For us, or even for us to play therapist with people, this is simply to create a safe, unfiltered space for people to talk. So I really want to say again for Jeremy and Eddie for being my amazing guests on today's podcast. And this is Garen Green signing out of the Open Table on behalf of the Green Room podcast. So thank you both for joining me, and I really look forward to getting this out there and seeing what we can do, and hopefully pull in some more guests as well who've got the brave courage like Eddie and Jeremy. But I'll give you all the details, for contact details, how you can contact us if you would like to share an inspiring story in a group chat about mental health. This is what this purpose is. As Eddie said, his purpose is this, having the open table so we can all sit around and speak what our challenges are and how we overcome them. So thank you again, guys. I really appreciate this. And this is Garen Green signing out of the Open Table on behalf of the Green Room podcast. So have a good day and look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.